to Practice Week. This is our second day of Practice Week today. And welcome to this session, which is delivered by Becky Ford. Just sounds like her summary of what sounds like quite an exciting piece of activism by students within Staffordshire University. So I'm looking forward to hearing about that. So just to give you a little bit of information about the Teaching Partnership, for those of you who are not aware of what we do. So my name's Deborah Stewart, and I'm one of 3 consultant social workers for the Teaching Partnership. We are one of 23 social work teaching partnerships in England, and we're funded by the Department for Education. We have a total of 28 partners, including local authorities, children's trusts, NHS trusts, and higher education institutes, which is universities. So we work with our partners to ensure really high quality education and training opportunities, training and development for students and newly qualified social workers and social workers across our region. And one of the ways we do this is by facilitating CPD opportunities like this and during our Practice Week, by commissioning research and lots of other projects that are around. So I'm going to hand over to Becky in a minute, but I just want to just give a bit of housekeeping first. If you could keep your cameras off and your microphones on mute throughout the session, it just helps with recording. The session is being recorded, so just let you know that as well. It's going to be put on our website as a learning resource after the session is done. Please do use the chat box to ask any questions. We'll keep an eye on that for you. I'm sure Becky will be happy to answer any questions as we go or at the end. And at the end, there'll be a link to a feedback survey as well. So please do give us your feedback. It's really important that we know sort of your experience of this session and others today on Practice Week. So yeah, without anything further, I'll pass over to Becky.
Hello, everyone. So whilst I just kind of set my screen up and share, I'll tell you who I am. So I'm Becky Ford. I'm one of the lecturers on the social work programmes at Staffordshire University, and I'm also the course lead for our new MA in social work that we are starting in January next year. So that's, you know, some exciting times for us at Staffordshire University. And I'm going to talk to you today about our student-led movement for around anti-racist practice, our anti-racist action group that we have developed over the last sort of 5 or 6 months, really. So it is just me here live in the room virtually with you today. Most of our students wanted to be involved, but it's just the wrong time. Our students who were in our anti-racist action group really wanted to be involved, but it's just the kind of wrong time for them with placements and, you know, academic work and portfolios all kind of due in the next week. So they've struggled, but we have got some recorded content that they've put together that I'm going to play as part of today's presentation. So we still get to hear their voices. I've listed everybody's name who's contributed to this presentation on the front here. So although it is just me presenting today, this is in no way, you know, just a me effort. This is, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of us have contributed to this. Monsaka, Adele, Leah, Shannon and Carolyn, who's another member of the team, have also been really, really important and core in building this presentation and importantly in developing our student-led action group. So if you've got any questions, you can put your hand up and ask, or you can save until the end. We should have a bit of time at the end of today's session for questions. So, you know, feel free to chip in. And I can see there's 1 or 2 familiar names on the attendance list. So it's lovely to see, you know, some of our students here too. So I'm going to start with, I think it's good to set the scene, as there are kind of 3 strands to the anti-racist actions that we're taking at the university and in the social work team, alongside what our student-led movement is doing. So I thought I'd talk you through those kind of 3 strands: the university and school actions, what we're doing in the social work team, and then importantly what our students are doing in our student-led action group. So from a university perspective, as an organisation, Staffordshire University has taken loads of steps recently to really drive forward their commitment, or our commitment, to equality and diversity and inclusion. So, there's been a whole host of things that have taken place over the last 12 months. So one thing, there's kind of 4 or 5 key themes, I suppose, that the university is really focusing on in their action to be anti-racist and to really address the impact of racism and systemic racism on university education. So firstly, the university has been really focused on understanding, raising awareness, developing awareness around the impact of microaggressions. So alongside the Students' Union, produced a video all about microaggressions and what they mean and what they are and how they can impact and how we can address them in our interactions and prevent them in our interactions with each other. We've also had a race inclusion conference for university staff that was chaired by the Dean of our school, Anne Ewens, the Health and Social Care School, alongside our Equality and Diversity and Inclusion lead from the university. So they facilitated this university-wide race inclusion conference, where again, we explored some of these really core issues around microaggressions, privilege, decolonising our curriculum, and importantly, how we can engage our students in this really important work around embedding anti-racism and, taking the steps that we need to decolonise our curriculum. In that process, our students need to be pivotal to that. So we had this race inclusion conference where Professor David Olusoga, who's a history professor, I think at the University of Bristol, or it might be Sheffield. I think he lives in Bristol, he said, but he works in Sheffield. Either way, he was really, really interesting. He gave this really powerful keynote speech. And one of the things that he really talked about that I took away from that was that often in universities such as organisations, and I think this extends to social work, we're lagging behind in terms of the way that we're being inclusive and representing diversity in all aspects of our practice, but in recruitment, in management, all of those things, because we think we're good people. We think we're not racist. We think, we're part of this kind of liberal community. And so we don't take the actions needed that are necessary to really address the impact of systemic racism in our organisations, and, as I say, to recruit staff from minoritised or marginalised communities, where other industries like business really have kind of driven that forward. And he was really powerful in the way that he spoke about that, and it certainly resonated with me quite profoundly, I think. So that was important learning for me, and I think because the university, we're really kind of driving that forward. And I know the feedback from that session was very similar to my feeling that we've rested on our laurels a little bit too long in this kind of liberal social work world without really getting to grips with what systemic racism means in social work, what it means in social work education, and how we can really take steps to address that. So as a school, the School of Health and Social Care, we've taken some steps, or quite a few steps actually, to really think about the impact of bias on recruitment and assessment of students, but also on recruitment of staff too. So for example, at a school-wide level, we've developed a 15-minute briefing around unconscious bias that we're giving, or we will be giving it at the beginning of all of our recruitment days and selection days for our prospective students. And it's not about ticking a box to say that we've done it. It's about really getting those involved in that process to pause and think about the impact of their own bias on that process, on that recruitment process, and the steps that we need to take as individuals and collectively to address that, so that that bias isn't a feature and doesn't impact on that process. So from a kind of a social work perspective, then, we've taken quite a lot of positive action, we think, over the last 12 months to really get to grips with, to change our curriculum, to get to grips with the impact of systemic racism on our practice as academics, and also as social work academics. So it started kind of way back in the first lockdown, when we were producing a weekly newsletter for our students. And what we wanted that to be was a really collaborative a really collaborative piece of work where students and staff were able to share their thoughts and blogs and resources generally, about, all kinds of topics. And we had, various kind of focused issues where we talked about LGBTQ issues, or we talked about bereavement. We've talked about, loads of different issues. But then obviously there was the murder of George Floyd in America, and like the rest of the world, that really gave us that really made us stop and pay attention. And I think we had done a little bit of what David Olusoga mentioned, that we'd kind of thought of social work, we talk about anti-oppressive practice, we talk about anti-discriminatory practice, but we hadn't really got to grips with anti-racist practice and what that is and what we should be doing in our teaching and learning with our students to unpick that and to really address it. So, that global outcry, really made us want to start taking some actual action. So we did some, initial things, some quite practical things. So we dedicated several, issues of our newsletter to Black Lives Matter. We set out a very clear statement on what we thought our role was in challenging systemic racism and the impact that it has on social work and social work education. But as a kind of reflective and value-led profession like we are, we acknowledged that we needed to do more, and that we've got to bring anti-racist social work back to the front and centre of what we do. And it's, that it was really a time for action and not words. And I'll say this quite a bit, but we were very clear that this had to be a movement for change, not an event or a series of events. This had to be something that we got started and we kept going. So as a team, we started the process of decolonising our curriculum. So we did things like we were making sure that our reading lists and our case studies, and importantly, our teaching team, were reflective of the diversity of lived experiences within our student cohorts, all to go towards that overall objective of making sure that we'd got anti-racist social work embedded through our courses, and that, every student in our cohorts could read, work by people that looked like them. They could hear from the, and see people who looked like them and who had similar lived experiences. But we were very clear. We realised that that was really only half of the job, and we needed to bring our students into this process. We needed their voices, particularly the voices of students from marginalised or minoritized races. We needed their voices in what we were doing. They are the future of our profession, but also, it's not just, it's not enough to just kind of take action as quite privileged, predominantly white staff. We needed to make sure that that process was inclusive and reflective of everybody's lived experiences. So that's kind of where we started with our student-led movement, was this real commitment to making sure that every member of our student cohort had the opportunity to feel consulted, to be part of the process, to have their voices heard. So with that in mind, I'm going to stop presenting this and I'm going to share about a 4-minute recording that some of our students have done. So you'll have to give me a minute while I stop sharing one screen and start another. And I have to remember to tick the box to share the sound. Otherwise, that could be very embarrassing. Okay. Can someone just give me a thumbs up so that I know you can hear the sound, or just shout out?
The beginnings, starting the conversation. Yes. The lecturer started the conversation and created the platform with an open call to all students to get involved and take the lead. Why be part of Anti-Racist Action Group? To make a change, acknowledge that racism is not a topic that is openly discussed in university, organizations, and society. As students, the importance of taking the lead to start the conversation now is very essential to us and in practice. Wanting to do it together and creating a movement, a safe space for us as students to share our experiences, we want to take action and create a change in our cohort and the social work course. It is not just an event to us, but we are committed to the movement and it is our blueprint.
The mission statement for the Why We Stand movement was to reflect our values, those that we hold personally and that are in line with social work practice. We wanted to use our active voices to effect change. The Why We Stand mission statement began with a mind map of ideas, which we understand is an ongoing process, in order to identify what is important to us. We want an opportunity for collaboration in order to challenge racism.
Our vision is to create a safe therapeutic environment where people can speak freely and learn about microaggressions and reflect on how people can make a change, learning about conscious and unconscious bias, knowing that not everyone is always ready to have conversation about racism, but that we need to start the conversation. Not just a safe space to have difficult conversation, but also to share our knowledge and skills and then reflect on having courageous conversation with people outside of our group and then learn from them.
So here are our actions so far and some of the things that we've done. So we've created a safe space to share our voices, ideas and resources. We also aim to expand our group, going global, so not just thinking about the university and Staffordshire itself, but other areas, other universities. We also want to make an impact online on social media, the university website. We've also facilitated a student-led session at Antiracist Action Social Work Week, and that was really successful. And we plan to present at the Midlands Teaching Partnership Conference, which is why we are here today.
Okay, so I'll have to go back to my other screen. It'll just take me a minute just to share that again. But they really are an absolutely amazing group. They have been so proactive, so kind of committed and dedicated to this kind of process, really, of working really hard to think about the ways that we can, as a group, challenge the impact of systemic racism. We can have those really important critical conversations together about, you know, all of those things that they said about microaggressions and what they are and how we can challenge them, how we can have those difficult conversations with each other in a safe space to really unpick, you know, each other's bias, or to reflect on how we can support people from outside of our group to reflect on and unpick their own bias and how that might impact on their interactions with other people. So we really have created that safe space to share our voices and ideas and resources. I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of those actions that Leah described in that sort of pre-recorded bit. I'm going to talk through that a little bit more, but as I say, we've and talk about those other actions about anti-racist social work week and all those kind of things that we've done. But as I say, the important thing was for us was about getting this conversation started, and we absolutely have done that. We created, you know, we took a really simple step. We created a Teams group and put it out as an open invite to all of our cohorts that, you know, they could join the Teams group. And within that group, we've got a whole range of resources. People have, you know, conversations about things that they found and share information that they found. You know, somebody the other day put a really interesting link up to an article in The Guardian all about decolonising curriculum. Really, really interesting stuff that perhaps we wouldn't know about if we weren't part of that. But as I say, you know, in those first few meetings, what we really set out to do was have those critical conversations in a really safe space. We worked really hard collectively to come up with a mission statement, but we're really aware that that mission statement is something that we can revisit, that we can change and amend depending on what we want to do. And the students came up with that vision very clearly about what they, I think I've got the slide there, you know, what they wanted to do, what they wanted to achieve through this Anti-Racist Action Group, and why we stand. You know, why are we doing what we're doing through this group? And it was really, really important, really fundamental that they led that development of the vision and, you know, development of the mission statement that Shannon talked through. So a little bit more about what we've done. So as part of our wider teaching, Carolyn facilitated or set up our Anti-Racist Social Work Week, and it was originally for our level 4 students in their first year, so that we're starting that process right at the beginning, but actually lots of students from level 5 and level 6 dipped into some of the sessions that were kind of a wider you know, invite. So we were really clear that in that Anti-Racist Social Work Week that we wanted to hear from a whole range of diverse voices. And so, and again, you know, that was designed in consultation and by our Anti-Racist Action Group. So we arranged for Prospera Tidham to speak. We got a representative from the Alison from the Gypsy Roman Traveller Social Work Association. She came and gave a really powerful, really interesting presentation. And importantly, our Anti-Racist Action Group, a few members of the group, Monsaka, Leah and Adele, who were part of that presentation, put together a whole session with a little bit of help from the staff team, but mostly they did it on their own, all about microaggressions and their lived experiences and how they can unpick and understand what microaggressions are and how, you know, how to address them. So it was really, really interesting, really important session that was the level 4 students found, you know, well, I've got some feedback actually in one of the later slides, but it was really profound for them. Monsaka, who has been a real key member of the group, she designed this flyer. She, you know, it's lovely. It's Monsaka in a slide, I think, is this flyer. It's so bright and colourful and vibrant. But she was really clear that she wanted to represent those principles of social justice and bring in that international perspective in on those slides. So this is just the timetable there, but you can see that Monsaka was part of introducing and welcoming, you know, the students to the live event, but also that on the Friday morning they did an hour's session all about why we stand and about microaggressions. And following on from that, one of the kind of unexpected but very pleasant outcomes was that we had a lot more level 4 students come and join our group, and I think that's really important because they're the students that are going to be with us for the next, you know, 2.5 years, and you know, we can really, or they can really take ownership and lead on this group moving forward. You know, the members that we've got now are in their final year, and so we're finishing soon, and we've got a couple at level 5, but you know, level 6 is a very busy time for students, and so it's really, really important to get those first year students involved in our group. And as I say, it was a really profound, really important week for the students in, you know, our first year students. But actually the thing that most of them took away was that session with the Anti-Racist Action Group, all about microaggressions. And they really took the time to plan the session and unpick what they wanted to address and what they wanted to get people to consider, you know, particularly, as I say, about microaggressions. So we had some lovely feedback. So some of the lasting impressions from our level 4 students were, you know, you can see here on this kind of Menti word cloud. So they talked about, you know, a commitment to anti-racist practice being a lifelong or a practice along a lifelong process. It's not something that we can ever stop doing. They spent a lot of time reflecting on privilege and understanding, you know, white privilege and what that means, you know, for our white students, what it means for them and how it impacts on their lived experience, but it also helps them to understand, I hope, what their lived experiences of our Black or minority ethnic students are, you know, living in a world that is built for and by white people. So it was a really inspiring and amazing week. The students, as I say, talked really positively about that, and really pivotal to that was our anti-racist action group. Again, I've got some more feedback here from the students, but there is some, there was some real benefit about having a session that was led by students and for students. It was really interesting around, understanding what they, that shared experience of students. I think that we couldn't have got that from the session if we had led it. If it had been members of the academic team talking about the things that the student-led group session discussed, I don't think we'd have got anywhere near as much positive response. I don't think we'd have got the feedback that we got in many ways. One of the kind of consequences was that I was able to have some really important conversations with a couple of students in our level 4 group who wanted to share some of their lived experiences around microaggressions, and we as a team were then able to take that discussion and make some changes and have some conversations with our whole cohort about making sure that everybody has the opportunity to speak and that all voices are heard, in group work and in all that, in lectures, those kind of things. So it was really important, and I think it was a really pivotal moment in our level 4 cohorts time on the course. I'm the level 4 lead. It's kind of my responsibility to oversee level 4, and the feedback that I got from our students about that student-led session was really powerful. I'm conscious that this slide is really small, but there are a few really key comments on there about the importance of allyship, the need to call out casual racism when we see it. There is no such a thing, but racism is racism, but that's the language that's used in the slides. So yeah, it was really profound, really important, and it's something that as a team I think we're very proud of. So our anti-racist action group, some members of the action group actually were then part of a short presentation that was delivered at our Exploring Race Inclusion conference that I've already talked about, where David Olasoga gave his keynote speech. So the students who were part of that, Adele, Monsaka, Leah, is a really core group of students who are really passionate about leading this and driving it forward. They presented at the Race Inclusion Conference that I talked about earlier. They put forward a really powerful challenge that I'm going to play at the end of this presentation to colleagues across the university. I'll come to that in a bit, but the feedback from our session about our group and what we've been doing, what the students have been doing to really challenge the impact of racism and systemic racism in social work and social work education was really positive feedback from colleagues across the university. I think the final total was almost 400 staff members were part of that conference, either who attended it live. So they've made a real impact across the whole university in the way that they are really pushing forward that message about anti-racist practice and action, anti-racist actions. So following on from that, I've done quite a bit of work with our Equality and Diversity and Inclusion lead for the university, and the group have been asked to develop a resource for staff around challenging microaggressions and how we do it in those day-to-day conversations where we might hear that question, where are you from? No, really, where are you from? Those things. How do we have those critical conversations with that individual who's made that microaggressive statement? How do we do that? Because I think the feedback I got from the EDI lead from the university was really positive about the session, but what she was saying often is that people are very good at identifying where there is overt or subtle racism, but what they're less confident in doing is knowing how to challenge it. So as a group, we're going to be working on that over the coming weeks and months to kind of develop some resources that staff can access around challenging, having those conversations. And I think, social workers and social work students, we're quite good at having those. I think Adele called them courageous conversations, because that's what we have to do often in practice. So I think, that would be a really, really important, powerful action for our group, and that will really have quite wide-reaching and far-reaching implications across the university, or at least that's the hope anyway. So our students are also involved in contributing to the curriculum, and any proposed changes to the curriculum, particularly around assessments, are being discussed widely with our cohorts, but in particularly with our anti-racist action group. So they're really important to that process of curriculum design and development. We're also in the process of developing a new curriculum for our undergraduate course, and again, we've taken that to members of our anti-racist action group. We've taken it to our wider cohorts as well, for them to really have a look at the assessments and what will work, what won't work, to have a look at the kind of the structure of the modules and what we're going to be teaching in those sessions, so that we can make sure we've got that diverse representation of voices in the curriculum and in the module content that we deliver. So they're really, really important, really fundamental to the way that we are moving and continuing that movement toward around anti-racism and anti-racist practice in our day-to-day practice. They've been, fundamental to that, and they will continue to be. They will absolutely continue to be for as long as we have buy-in from our students, as long as they keep turning up for our meetings and, coming up with all these kind of amazing presentations and delivering, coming up with all these brilliant thoughts that they've had around how we can work collaboratively, how we can engage with other organisations. One of the things we've talked about quite a lot is developing a mentoring scheme, so that we can offer mentors to our current students, but mentors who are out in practice, who've got some, maybe ASYEs, or maybe people who've been qualified a few years, who can really help our final, or support and mentor our final year students through that kind of navigate that route out of education and into employment. So we've got loads of things that we want to work on. We really want to build our social media presence. We really want to link in with other groups, other universities. We've got some great ideas, but I'm going to play another little snippet of the recording that the students have done as the kind of almost nearly but not quite conclusion to the presentation. So I'll have to do the not sharing and sharing again bit. Oh. Now I did the thing that I'm not supposed to do and tried to share it without sharing the sound.
Just not enough to say I am not racist. We need to action. We need action to challenge. So ask yourself each day and now. But now our challenge to you is, what have you done to be anti-racist today? What have you done? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So that challenge, that question, is what they asked every academic and every member of staff that came to the Race Inclusion Conference. And it's a question that we, as part of our group, we're asking ourselves every day: what have you done today to be anti-racist? They have ended every presentation they've done, every session they've done with that question. They asked our level 4 students, and they'll ask everybody, I think, going forward: what have you done today to be anti-racist? So almost that's kind of where I wanted to end, but I did just want to say just finally a little bit about what our next steps are. Oh no, that's the wrong presentation. That's a whole other thing, sorry. Clicked on the wrong one. That one. It's coming. So just finally, I wanted, as I say, just to kind of touch on what we're going to do next. And I think I've mentioned some of this already, but we really want to, as I say, make that impact on social media, on the university website. We really want to forge links with any other groups that are out there, you know, in universities or in practice, you know, particularly groups in practice, I think, but anywhere that where there are other groups of a similar nature or where people might be interested in forming an anti-racist action group, we want to make links. We want to be part of those, want to build a bigger community so that we can work together and we can support each other. You know, from my perspective, I've been making links and, you know, reaching out to other organisations, and I know students have been doing that during their time on placements, if they've been meeting placements from other students from other organisations. But we really want to build it. We really want to be part of a network of groups that can work together collaboratively to take action to address, you know, get rid of the impact of racism and systemic racism in social work, you know, across the board. It's only, you know, that's a massive task, but that's why we are very clear that this has to be a movement and not an event. This is something that we are going to keep driving forward for the rest of our professional careers, and we hope that our students, as they move into practice, will do exactly the same. We're not going to stop. So I think that is all I wanted to say. So I just thought I'd open up for questions, really, and if anybody's got any questions or thoughts or comments, I'm happy to kind of answer them as best I can.
Thank you so much, Becky. So if people want to use the chat, if you have any questions, or put your hand up if you want to come on screen and ask Becky anything. I had a question, Becky, as I was just listening. I was just wondering, and it might be something sort of better for the students to answer, really, but I was just wondering about, as they sort of started this, whether there were any sort of surprising challenges along the way, and on the other hand, sort of surprising like encouragements as well that they perhaps weren't expecting throughout this.
I don't know that we've had any challenges, actually. I mean, as you say, the students might have a different view on that. I think in terms of support, maybe it's not surprising, but the university have really embraced what we're doing and really got behind it. And I think for some of the students in the group who are from minoritized races, I think that has been a little shocking, actually. I think, you know, some of them have talked quite openly about their experiences, previous experiences in education, and, you know, hearing and being subject to racism in education, you know, from people in positions of authority. And I think the fact that the university has embraced it, and not just within the social work school, but right across the board, I think has been a little pleasantly surprising to those students. Yeah, and you know, I have had quite a lot of our students talking about, our Black students in particular, talking to me about their experiences of racism in education prior to coming to university. So to have it openly discussed and to see that people are taking steps to address that has been, not just for the students in our group, but across the whole of our cohorts, has been something that they've really, really appreciated.
encouraging for them. That's really great, and it's great that it's being talked about so much more now, isn't it? Because that's what we need to happen, isn't it? Because I don't know about you, but when I was studying, that was sort of 12 years ago now, but it just wasn't the same. And if you think about social media as well, has a massive part to play in it, doesn't it?
It does.
And about getting people talking about it and raising awareness. And again, that wasn't there either when I was studying 12 years ago. So I think it's a great time to be a student, to actually be contributing to these really fundamental changes. Really, it's an exciting time for them.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think you're right. I think, you know, if you look at it kind of historically, I think sort of in the 70s and 80s there was a real commitment to anti-racism in social work education. You know, there's quite a bit that's been written around that, particularly because it was kind of the era of apartheid, and there was lots of activism around, you know, getting rid of apartheid, you know, across the globally. And then I think sort of through the 90s and the 2000s, we kind of lost that, and it's been replaced with this focus on a general anti-oppressive and anti-discriminatory practice. And those are really important, but we can't overlook the lived experiences of people from minoritized races and what that means in terms of our social work practice. So I think anti-racist, I trained a little bit longer ago than you, but I certainly didn't cover anti-racist practice at all, and it's something that we're going to make sure it's everywhere in our practice, in our teaching.
We had something in the chat from Nash saying that Nash is the anti-racist practice lead for London Borough of Sutton, and there's contact details there as well for anyone wanting to find out what's going on in Sutton. So that's great. Thank you, Nash.
Brilliant. I will put you on my list and I'll get in touch, Nash. Thank you.
Excellent. So does anybody have any more questions for Becky at all before we finish? Speak now. Okay, no, I think we're done, and that's fine. So can I just thank you, Becky, so much for coming and telling us about everything that's been going on. It's absolutely fantastic to hear the level of sort of student involvement as well within everything that you're doing at Staffordshire. So thank you so much. And can I just point people towards the link to the survey as well in the chat function, and just ask if you could complete that for us. That would be fantastic. So yeah, thank you again, everyone, for attending. Thank you, Becky, for your time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your week.
Lovely. Thank you.